Sojourner Truth was a freed black woman in New York who also fought for emancipation and women's rights. Elijah Lovejoy was a militant editor of the anti-slavery newspaper in Illinois. His printing press was destroyed 4 times. The 4th time his press was thrown into a river and Lovejoy was killed by a mob who promptly burned his warehouse. He became an abolitionist martyr. Frederick Douglass, the greatest of the black abolitionists, published the North Star, his own abolitionist newspaper. He was a former slave who escaped slavery at age 21. His book, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, depicted his life as a slave, his struggle to read and write, and his escape to the North. His terminology is best known as being flexibly practical, in contrast to Garrison, who was stubbornly principled. He looked to politics to end slavery. He backed the Liberty Party in 1840 and the Republican Party in the 1850s. Eventually, most abolitionists, including pacifist Garrison, would support the Civil War to end slavery. In 1820, Southern anti-slavery societies outnumbered Northern ones. After 1830s, white Southern abolitionism was silent. Causes of the Southern concern. First, Nat Turner's revolt coincided with Garrison's liberator. The South sensed a Northern conspiracy and called Garrison a terrorist. Georgia offered $5,000 for his arrest and conviction. The second cause for concern was the nullification crisis of 1832. It gave Southerners haunting fears of Northern federally supported abolitionist radicals inciting wholesale murder in the South. Jailings, whippings, and lynchings of anti-slavery whites emerged. And the third cause for Southern concern was increased abolitionist literature that flooded Southern mails. Abolitionist literature was banned in the Southern mails. The federal government ordered Southern postmasters to destroy abolitionist materials and to arrest federal postmasters who did not comply. Pro-slavery whites responded by launching a massive defense of slavery as a positive good. Slavery is supported by the Bible, according to Genesis, and Aristotle quoted as saying slavery existed in ancient Greece. It was good for barbarous Africans who were civilized and Christianized. Master-slave relationships resembled those of a family. George Fitzhugh, the most famous of pro-slavery apologists, he contrasted happiness of their slaves with the overworked northern wage slaves. The fresh air in the South was much better as to the stuffy factories in the North. Blacks as slaves were also given full employment. Slaves were also cared for in sickness and old age, unlike Northern workers. The Gag Resolution of 1836, Southerners drove it through Congress. All anti-slavery appeals in Congress were to be ended without debate. Anti-slavery petitions also prohibited, seen by Northerners as a threat to the First Amendment. Republican John Quincy Adams waged a successful 8-year fight against it and repealed it in 1844. However, the banning of anti-slavery materials in the mails was a separate issue. Abolitionists, especially Garrison, were unpopular in many parts of the North. Northerners brought up to revere the Constitution. Slavery was protected and part of a lasting bargain. The ideal of the Union, which was advocated by Webster and others, had taken deep root. Garrison's pleas to disunite was seen as dangerously radical. The North was heavily dependent on the South for economic well-being. Northern bankers owed by Southern plantation owners about $300 million. The New England mills were also fed by Southern cotton. Many mob outbursts in response to extreme abolitionists, specifically citing Lewis Tappan's New York house, which was ransacked in 1834 to a cheering crowd. In 1835, Garrison was dragged through the streets of Boston with the rope tied around him. Reverend Elijah P. Lovejoy was also murdered. Ambitious politicians avoided abolitionists. Abolitionism was political suicide. By 1850, the abolitionism had had a deep effect on the Northern psyche. Many saw slavery as unjust, undemocratic, and barbaric. Many opposed extending slavery to the newly acquired territories. Free Soilers swelled their ranks during the 1850s.